The first and only Christmas without my father took place in 1987. He was called away to Canada for the most devastating plane crash the Navy had ever seen. Early in the morning on December 21st, a chartered DC-8 63CF plane en route from Egypt lost power, fell from the heavens, and buried itself into a field of freshly fallen snow. Of course, it wasn't explained to my brother and I why my father, a forensic pathologist, wouldn't be with us for the holiday. We were too young to understand. His absence was particularly stressful for my mother with 2 small children, but Christmas ensued as normal as could be, though this time she refused to cook dinner, which, if you knew my mother, was wildly abnormal behavior. While Paul and I eagerly opened our presents on Christmas morning, hundreds of miles away, my father picked through pieces of twisted metal in search of human remains to be returned home to their respective families. It was a cheerful homecoming for him. He brought presents for everyone, a chemistry set for Paul, a pair of earrings for my mom, and a snow globe for myself, which I purposely broke within a month because I wanted to touch what was inside. But the most crucial of these gifts was a large 3-ring black binder, which I would become acquainted with years later. I discovered the binder when I was 7 years old, 3 years after we left Virginia and moved to Florida, where winter doesn't exist and Christmas is stifled with humidity. My father's job weighed on him more than ever, and he became mysterious and withdrawn, retreating to his den with a bottle of wild turkey and overstuffed manila case files. On nights I couldn't sleep, I would sneak into his office, where he kept my books on the bottom shelf. Having read If You Give a Mouse a Cookie one too many times, I decided to probe my father's books of pathology and disease. My fingers migrated from spine to spine, finally resting on one with Sherman scribbled in whiteout. I removed it from the shelf and was surprised at how heavy it was. Cross-legged in my pajamas, I curiously thumbed through the introductory pages. It must not have been opened in years because it kept trying to close. The first photograph, sleeved in plastic, was a close-up of a man's foot with a numbered tag next to it. It was wearing a tube sock. It was the same brand of socks my brother wore. I turned the plastic page to find the following photograph, taken from further away, the colorful bands of tube socks still in focus, but with bits of mangled, frozen flesh protruding from where the man's shin should have been. My mouth filled with saliva and a hot wave of nausea overwhelmed me, but I could not avert my gaze. Something had taken control and was making my hand turn the pages. I was a passenger in that room. I was completely mystified as to what this book was about, where it came from, and why my father possessed it. More so, I wondered what my brother and I were doing the moment the photographs were taken. Up until this night, I never understood the magnitude of my father's profession and horror he experienced on a daily basis. He always seemed like a monster to me, when really, it was the aftermath of the monsters around which his job orbited. It made sense how tightly he hugged my mom. Staring blankly at a photograph of the wedding ring on a pilot's severed hand, I could think only of my dad and how much I truly loved him. I threw up all over the carpet. By the time I finished looking through the binder, my hands were sore and smelled how I imagined decomposition or snow would smell. They felt grimy. It bothered me. I felt physically tainted by the pictures, as though I had been fondling that tube sock or wetted hand. As time went on, my fascination with the black binder took over, and my seemingly one-time investigation turned into a weekly ritual. I noticed new details, and as my vocabulary grew, so did my understanding of the text accompanying the photographs. Words like posthumous, hemorrhage became familiar. I got used to the smell, and the filth on my hands was actually comforting. For the first time, I felt a morbid connection to my father, and it slowly began to fill the emotional gap that separated us throughout my adolescence. One evening, in high school, I ventured into the study to read the binder. I knelt down to the bottom shelf and, to my disbelief, discovered it was missing. I looked everywhere for it, in between the books I had outgrown, in my father's desk, even underneath the furniture. Had I been found out? Did he notice the binder's once stubborn spine yielding over time? I panicked at the thought of my parents knowing about my obsession and the sick, psychopathic daughter they would think I was developing into. I pictured the awkward kitchen table conversation, the anxious look on my mother's face, and countless therapy appointments I would have to endure to rid my impressionable mind of what a psychiatrist would diagnose as trauma. But the confrontation never came. Days, weeks, years went by without any closure or reunion. The 3-inch void in the bookcase collected cookbooks and Good Housekeeping magazines. Though several years have passed, every time I go home to visit, I still look for it. Hopeful, desperate, sentimental, sheepish, black binder, old friend who taught me all about the cold, hard facts of life and the violence of its conclusion. Who took you away from me? Or had you grown a little pair of tube-socked legs of your own and scuttled away? I guess I could ask of your whereabouts. The answer is probably simple. You were thrown out, put in storage, burned, shredded, forgotten. But I like to imagine you perched atop a heap of long-lost beloved things from my childhood, reading your insides out to tattered plush dolls, broken snow globes, revealing to Winnie the Pooh and Rainbow Bright exactly what happens to a human body after falling 30,000 feet from the sky.